I can honestly say I didn't know you were mad at me for taking you to the psychologist. And I don't know if that's just because I was so in my own stuff.
Again, I don't know if I was mad at you for taking me to the psychologist or if I was mad at you for, okay. I know I was mad at you for reading my diary.
Well, we definitely know that.
But I think it kind of, the psychologist was like chump change in comparison to that for me. It was just kind of, something I was being told to do. But what I know I didn't know is that, like, I didn't have any thought or understanding that the choice of going to that child psychologist and then to that child psychiatrist, I didn't realize that would change the course of my entire life. There was never a thought that decision changed my entire life.
And I can honestly say I didn't know that either. I didn't understand that you would be on these medications forever and ever.
Yeah.
I thought this was a temporary, let's have some therapy, let's get through this next 6 months kind of thing.
Right.
And and then by the time they did put you on those meds, and especially when you went off to college, I had no control whatsoever.
Right.
I had no input, no control. It was totally in your court, whether you saw the psychiatrist, whether you continued. I couldn't even ask the question whether you were getting adequate care at college.
Right. And yeah, I mean, there was never, I think the difficulty with medicating children is that or even teenagers, I mean, it's hard to look at myself as a total child at that time, but obviously I know that I certainly was not a full-fledged adult. But the habits and the things you do at that age become part of who you are as a young adult. I don't recall anyone saying to me in so many words, your brain is broken, therefore you need these pills. But it was said through actions.
Oh, sure.
It was said through the actions of, you're not, you say you're not coping well, or we're gonna give you something to help you. That implies that you are not strong enough, you are not good enough, you are not whole enough or educated enough, or it just completely implies that you are not enough to go through this incredibly human thing without chemical help. And when you get that message as a 15-year-old, I think it really does a number on your emotional development over the next, for a really long period of time. So it never occurred to me that I didn't need them. The drugs. It never occurred to me that I didn't need antidepressants because I was told I did.
Yeah, and unfortunately that psychologist and psychiatrist told me you did.
Right.
But wouldn't discuss why.
I mean, from my perspective, there's not a lot of support for parents who choose not to do that.
There's very little support for parents who are going through this at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if we look at not what's wrong with the child, but what happened to the child, which I think is mostly the situation. Not that I'm not saying in every situation it's like this, but I think the first place to look is what happened to the person, not what's wrong with the person. And the parents are in control of that to such a large extent that it's really hard sometimes for a parent to look at that. Like, what did I do to help create this? What situation happened to my child that maybe I didn't handle the best way? Or it's very hard for parents.
Had you known what you know now, what would you have done differently how would you have approached it differently mentally as a parent? I'm sure there's a level of I have to do something now because I don't know what happens tomorrow with my kid, and if this is a safety net that we put under the kid, we'll deal with the consequences later. The problem is that for me, dealing with the consequences turned out to be a lifelong thing.
Yeah.
And
it's a huge sadness for me, right? I have to think about this question. So this is always complicated by the parent situation. So my first answer would be that I would have knowing what I know now, I would have gotten some help for myself. Because instead of kind of thinking the whole problem was you, I would have realized, knowing what I know now with beautiful hindsight, that so much of my reaction was probably a little bit of an overreaction around the idea of, I already lost 1/3 of my family, I can't lose 2/3 of my family. So that's probably what led me to read your diary and to panic when I did it. And then it also put me in the vulnerable position of actually listening to the psychologist instead of getting a second opinion.
Right.
I really think I should have, when that psychologist said to me, you're wasting your money, she has a clinical anxiety disorder and you need to take her to a psychiatrist, I wish I would have said, let me check with another psychologist.
If you could have projected like the, 10, 11, 12-year-old me onto the choices I started having to make when I was like 15, 16, 17, 18, early 20s, like, do you think I would have made those same choices?
No.
Where do you think I would have done things differently?
The reason I say no is because just even from reading your book, you describe the way you were so dulled and why and how there was no reason to have any ambition if you really didn't want to live.
Yeah.
And so if at 15 we had gotten to the bottom, we had let you grieve, and we had allowed all that depression to leave you, you still would have been the intense child that you were at 10 or 11. But you wouldn't have been robbed of your ambition.
Yeah, because I had a lot of ambition.
You wouldn't have been robbed of your ambition and your joy of life, and you wouldn't have felt so diminished.
Yeah.
And so no, I think that there would have been a different timeline. But I do think maybe you wouldn't have had the chance to give what you're about to give to the world. I'm really proud of you.
Maybe just walking up to the gauntlet.
Or
to the Coliseum, maybe.
I'm really proud of you. I'm really proud of you.
Most of the messages I get are just about like people who don't have any idea how, like, it's like everything they know about themselves has been stripped away, and so they don't have any foundation for their life anymore, and they don't know who they are, and then they're having these physical effects or these emotional swings on top of it.
And they're now 35 years old.
And they're 35, yeah.
So they've had this incredible delay. It's like they've lost all of their 20s, their early 30s, and then they look around them and they see the people, because this is a lot of my clients right now, right? This just seems to be my age group. They look around them and they see that everyone else has made a career choice or everyone else has been able to secure a relationship. These people have lost 10 years of their life or 15 years of their life, and now they already felt inadequate. Now they feel even more inadequate.
Well, and it can, at least for me, it felt like that on a physical level too. I couldn't point to anything that was the same. Like, one, you're having mood swings that are very reminiscent of like hormonal mood swings as a teenager, but also your physical body's kind of going haywire and your hormones are all over the place, and like, like nothing is familiar.
And now all of a sudden you wake up, you're dealing with all this physical stuff. You're fighting with how you feel about yourself because for 15 years you thought you couldn't function without some drug, and you don't know how to fit in either.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking for me, and this actually is my client base. it's heartbreaking. And it has erased so many of your memories.
Yeah.
You know, when I ask some of my clients, well, what were you like when you were a little girl? Or what were you like when you were a little boy? What did you enjoy? And they can't remember.
Yeah. And that makes it really difficult. I mean, I can't really remember, and it makes it difficult to try and answer basic questions when, you know, you're talking about, okay, well, what do I want to do for a career now? Like, what did you like as a kid? What did you want to be when you grew up? Like, it's just, people can't really, I mean, I still don't know, really. But,
yeah.
I feel especially sorry for people who have grown up in really traditional households who are going through this. Like, I had the benefit of having someone who didn't think inside the box at all as a parent, so it was okay for me to, you know,
Find a way to heal that was a little unusual.
Well, find a way to heal that was unusual, but also live an unusual life. You know, it was never a question about I wanted to open a bakery or sell my bakery and take a trip around the world in the middle of antidepressant withdrawal. Like, you kind of just supported it all along. And like I said, you always made me, I can't say you made me feel whole because no one had the power to do that other than me, but you always viewed me as whole. And
Yes.
I think that I really felt that on an instinctual level.
I think that's critical, is that if you take your child to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, that psychiatrist or psychologist has to view their client as whole, not as broken. And that's the whole thing, because if your psychologist views you as broken, you're going to think you're broken.
Yeah.
There are benefits to being broken. An excuse for not, fulfilling obligations.
Or for even trying to figure out what you want.
Oh yeah. And you can just take this little pill.
Yeah, and to be clear, this is not a dig on other people. It's what I did. So it's what I did the whole time. Even if it didn't always look like it, right? Like, I don't really feel like I ever lived up to my potential really until lately.
It's super hard. It was super hard for me because I keep going back to that one moment when you crawled in bed with me.
I was like 28 or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you were so bereft. And you said, I just think there's something wrong with me and I'll never be right. And I knew deep in my gut there was nothing wrong with you. And I told you that. And you got up and got out of bed and walked out of the room because you didn't want to hear it, that there was nothing wrong with you.
I couldn't hear it.
We've come a long way, baby. The way it's portrayed in the book, in your book, is that it wasn't really a slow decision to get off of the meds. It was more almost like...
I think it was like if we had a puzzle that was 100 pieces, I had spent 15 years putting 99 pieces together.
Yeah.
And then once I got the 100th piece, everything just became clear and I started moving. And so it wasn't like, day one, realization, day two, get off the drugs. There was some steps in there, and there was, I had to make an appointment and wait for the appointment.
Well, yeah, and also I had been noticing a downward trajectory, right? Emotionally, you were going down, 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 down.
And I think I noticed that too. I think I was so numb and flat and still depressed despite, all the cocktail of antidepressants for a decade and a half, that I'm not gonna go as far to say I was scaring myself, because I wasn't, because there was like almost no fear reaction in me at all. Everything was so turned off that I wasn't
And if you didn't want to be here anyway, then why would you be scared about dying?
Yeah, so there was no real fear there, but there was just kind of a self-awareness and an awareness in general that something's not right here. Like, there was almost, if I could call it curiosity, which is, I wasn't really feeling actively curious, but it was almost just like this is not adding up, that I should be feeling this way given all the antidepressants I'm on.
Did you ever feel better on the antidepressant, or did you just feel number?
I don't ever recall feeling better, but again, I was so young, and that period of time is so gone that I don't remember feeling like, great, I'm functional in the world again. I don't remember that at all, and I don't think that we really gave it enough time either. I wasn't someone who, I had been struggling with this for years, and then we threw me on them, and we had a pretty clear before and after. Everything was so chaotic as it was, in the sense that, Dad had died, we were moving. I was learning to drive, I was studying for the SATs, I still had to go to college, I was still really concerned about whether or not I'd get good grades, like, I wanted to be liked at school, and I was also being handled with these kid gloves with all the adults, and, the kind of like, how you doing, honey? Every time I saw someone I knew. So it was just, everything was just the upside down. But what I did know was that over the years, if I had accidentally missed a dose, I knew that, shit kind of went sideways in my body, because I thought that getting off the antidepressants was going to be as easy as going on them. If I, missed a dose or, couldn't get a refill right away for some reason, I assumed that the symptoms that came out were me. And that was just like basic child's play level of drug withdrawal. It wasn't even like the real big monster stuff that happened. So,
and sometimes I was somehow in some sort of denial about that, because I remember it probably was, I think it was while you were at Middlebury. You came home and you had forgotten some of your meds, or you ran out of some of your meds, or there was some issue with that. And it was a scramble in Reno to get you your meds, and you were really on edge in there. And I think it didn't land with me that we were looking at withdrawal.
No, because it wasn't part of it was not mentioned at I was on those drugs for almost a decade and a half, and it was not mentioned once until I saw the psychiatrist to get off them in 2016, and then she said, it's a little like the flu, it's really rare, it'll probably last a couple days, and that's it.
Well, and the other thing that was never mentioned to me, which is something I really think is important and that parents should know, is the physical side effects, which then you began to have, and we all thought they were unique problems that weren't related to the antidepressant use. Right. Oh, all of a sudden we're going to the gastroenterologist every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
You know? What's with that, right? It's a separate problem. Yeah. And these things are just so critical for parents to understand and research.
The UK has updated their guidelines. They, just a couple months ago, they updated their guidelines to say that therapy should be the first thing.
Oh my God, what a thought. Let's look at what actually is causing this, not just try to cover it up. Yeah. What a thought. Let's try to cure it, not just help you cope with it and live with it.
Right. It's a great change, and I shouldn't be laughing about it, but it's just, there's a little bit of a duh factor here that I'm like, okay.
I wish there was a way to get the word out to parents that they really need to get informed before they make this decision for their child. Yeah. They need to understand how this is going to affect the child long term, not only emotionally, but physically and mentally and in every way. They've got to exhaust all the options before they choose medication. They've got to find someone the child connects with. If the child won't talk to this particular psychologist, they need to find one the child will connect with. They need to keep trying. If it's not a psychologist, it needs to be a minister or a friend or an aunt or an older sibling, whatever it is, however that child can feel connected and supported. And the parent needs to get support for themselves. Any alternative modalities. Yeah. If you don't want to use traditional psychology, then there are so many non-traditional healing modalities. You just have to find what's right for that child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's true for the person who's trying to come out of it too, right? I mean, it's even harder in some ways as an adult when you're in charge of your own healing and you feel limited in your resources or your options and you don't know where to look, or your, insurance or whatever. I mean, it's just like, you have to believe in the power of your own ability to heal and the power of being whole. You have to believe in that enough to keep seeking out different professionals, different forms of support, and then take the big risks to, if needed, blow up your life and do something different. I mean, there's the nothing changes if nothing changes is that old saying, but it's a perfect example in this case where you cannot expect your whole self to change and for your view of the world to change and to really enter into a place of healing if you make no action in your life, no tangible action. Which is, very, very scary, and it usually means cutting off certain people or quitting a job and, just trusting that something is going to work.
And noticing when it starts to work.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what happens, is that people do that and they don't notice when the angel appears in their life.
Mm-hmm.
The helper.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. Yeah. And that's what it is. I remember I was thinking in my interview yesterday, she was asking me some of the things I did to, start healing and stuff. And then I said that, and I don't even know if I've told you this before, but one of the earliest moments I remember of kind of being in that place where I was like, oh, I can't ever go back on these drugs or back to where I was because I won't get this, right? Is I drank coffee every single morning for 15 years or whatever it was. And one day I smelled the coffee and I internalized the smell of the coffee. And it was I had smelled coffee for the first time ever. Mm-hmm. And there was an awareness of how beautiful it was to smell that coffee, and a moment where, as weird as it sounds, I felt grateful for the coffee and to be able, and it just it was such an overwhelming feeling, and it lasted for moments, and then it probably, God, I was probably bending an ironing board in half out of rage 10 minutes later. But I just remember early on that I'd never really smelled coffee before.
Because you were coming alive.
Mm-hmm.
And probably as a child you had smelled coffee.
Yeah.
But that was totally gone. And now as an adult, for the first time, you were starting to experience life in a way that wasn't completely dulled by these medications. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so important that people notice.
Yeah.
And that's what I really try to get my clients to do, is to notice the gifts, to notice the angels, to notice the helpers, to notice those moments, because that's what keeps you going.
Yep. And right? It's not about noticing it logically. It's not about a gratitude journal or, you have to feel it, and you can't feel it until you start to really move aside a lot of the crap. And so when you're moving aside the crap and you start to notice or feel something, that's the sign that you're on the right path and moving in the right direction. But it's just when people's whole lives are falling apart or are apart, they're there's the tendency to brush aside the smell of coffee because like everything else is still on fire, right? But you know, like that for me, the coffee was the gateway. The coffee was the gateway to healing.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Which was, you know, pretty.
You had never told me that story before.
I
about
didn't
the coffee.
remember it until yesterday. It was just like this kind of random thing that popped in.
Since banana chocolate chip is not my favorite flavor.
Banana or chocolate, they're gonna be.
Temple and I went on a trip down memory lane. I took her to the Sizzler.
I didn't even know the Sizzler survived the pandemic.
Yeah, you want to go with us? There's one in Sparks.